Hello, and welcome to Smeg and the Femmes, a podcast to discuss Red Dwarf from a different perspective. I'm Emily, and today I'll be talking about Series 5, Episode 6, Back to Reality. And I'll be exploring this episode with the help of my guest, Veronica Rich, who hasn't gone anywhere since Demons and Angels, but welcome back.
Hello.
Oh, Now, this episode is the one which sort of general fandom consensus agrees is the very best episode of the series. Obviously, it's not everyone's personal favourite, and I understand that completely. But it's the one which regularly tops fandom polls, and I can absolutely see why. I mean, it has a great premise, it has wonderful guest actors, and our regulars all give outstanding performances. It is just honestly, it's a pleasure to watch.
It really is. It's kind of the high point, not of the entire 30-run series. I think peaks and valleys, but this is definitely up there. One of the peaks, if not the peak for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, it is actually my very favourite episode. I mean, it sort of fights it out with Thanks for the Memory and Dimension Jump. And at the moment, it appears to one.
I've got it on here in the background as we tape this. I've got it on silent just to kind of look at it, the visuals, and it occurred to me that the opening where they're on the dead ship and seeing all the bodies and all, I wonder if this was something that Doug went back to years later when he wrote Samsara for Series 11.
Possibly. It might also be. I mean, it might also be a bit reminiscent of Epideme, which I admit is not an episode I watch that much, but it's a similarly kind of opening sequence with eerie music and sound effects. I mean,
That's true.
Same kind of atmosphere. Yeah.
Yeah, he does seem to like empty ships with skeletons a lot.
Doesn't he? Yeah. Now. This SS Esperanto sequence is the only part of the episode which was directed by Juliet May, and good for her. It's a really well directed sequence. I mean, there's a lot of interesting lighting and so on. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and it's very sort of. I mean, how do I put this? Eerie, I think, is it? There's a sort of dripping sound effect, and it does a really good job of sort of building a very foreboding mood, Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it definitely sets the tone for the rest of it.
Yeah, and yet it is fun. It is still funny. I mean, you do still get listeners saying, "Why would Haddock kill itself? Why am I asking that question?"
Well, and some of the things they put in, like you see the people having killed themselves, and that's a horror. That's not terribly funny. But then you get to the part about the fish closing its own gills, and that's pretty funny.
I mean, that's kind of Red Dwarf in a nutshell. I mean, it shows you something really horrific, the skeletons that kill themselves, and then you get a Haddock joke.
Right. I mean, the whole thing is nothing. The entire series is basically just dark comedy. It's like, what happens if you took an absolutely horror show of a setup for someone's life and tried to make it funny.
Exactly. Oh, I do have to say, I mean, I'm not 100% sure. There's a bit which I'm not 100% sure how much of it is Craig and how much of it is Lister as a character. But the way he holds sort of this random goo up to his face, which turns out to be hallucinogenic venom, and it's like, I think he actually licks it. But I mean, still, why would you hold that up to your face, Mister?
Well, Lister does have kind of an oral fixation. I mean, the cigarettes and putting things in his mouth to chew on and all. Yeah.
Actually, I mean, I don't think he actually licked it, thank God, but I mean, still, you don't pick up random goo on some deserted spaceship and hold it next to your face.
Exactly.
Oh yeah, of course. This is one of those things where Rimmer's sort of back on the ship, and being presumably because he's soft light and he prefers to be out of danger and so on, and you get one of those bits where he actually sounds briefly like an officer, like he. I'll put this to be nice, like he actually knows what he's doing.
Like he has some intelligence. Yeah, I have to say, as individual scenes of the entire run of the series go, visually and acted wise, I really enjoy the part where they're all on the ship and they film it through the green filter sonar screen, and he sounds like he knows what he's talking about. It's one of
Exactly.
those
Yeah.
little moments.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously it makes sense, that over the course of 30 years that Rimmel would become more competent. But this is relatively early in the run, I mean, but it's nice that it's kind of nice that they put in these little moments. I mean, I suppose you could say, if you're being really cynical, well, of course he was reading off the screen, so I mean, obviously he sounds like he knows what he's doing. But I mean, that's only if you want to be particularly mean.
But they all sound, I mean, they're all, it's notable that they're all kind of getting along. I mean, they're all of a mind, they're not like quarreling with each other, Rimmer's not, you know, arguing things just for the sake of argument. I mean, they're all, working together. It's, I won't say it's relatively rare, but, it's not real
Yeah,
common.
it is nice. After I mean, obviously, I've just recently recorded the rest of five, and a lot of it has Rimmer in conflict with the rest of the crew, whereas
Right.
in this episode obviously kind of unites them. I mean, not just now, but also in the hallucination, because they're trying to figure out what the hell is going on, and they sort of cling to each other because that's the only familiar bit that they know.
Right. And you see if I can blabber on here for another few seconds. As far as the conceit of the episode, well, the despair, the squid ink touches them all, and puts them in this hallucination of a reality of fascism or whatever. You see where the three organic beings are on the ship and presumably come in contact with ink somewhere, whatever. They touch things. They're standing there waiting to go back to the ship, and they all start, having their sob story. I don't think anyone's ever really loved me. Why do
Oh,
I have to be the strong one? But Rimmer never gets touched with anything. And so I'm watching this and I'm thinking, obviously he has a physical presence that could be affected. His bee could have gotten infiltrated. And I've always watched this episode thinking, well, this is the point. And I think you're meant to think, well, this is the point where they all get contaminated somehow. But I wonder if we're already inside the hallucination by this point. Maybe Starbug has been underwater and it's leaky somewhere, and the squid ink has gotten into the water or the mist in the air in the ship and has affected them before this point. So at this point where you open the episode, they're already in that maybe the Esperanto isn't real at all.
This is entirely possible because we multiple times trying to work out exactly when the hallucination starts. And honestly, I can't. It's done so
Right.
absolutely. It's done so absolutely seamlessly. It works beautifully. I mean, I always used to think, that it started when they think Starbuck has crashed because that's the cue for it. But it's actually not clear that it had already started by then.
Yeah. I feel like it opens and it's already inside the hallucination. However they were affected, went underwater, ink got in through mist vapor, or, a leaky ship, or I don't know. That's my take on it.
I hadn't thought about them literally already being in hallucination from the very start of the episode. I mean, because that gives that puts a really interesting light on things because obviously, as I was going to point out, you do not see Red Dwarf, the ship, in this episode at all, and of course, after this, we don't see it for two whole series, So I mean, obviously, sometime between the end of Demons and Angels and the beginning of this episode, they lost Red Dwarf. They did manage to get back to Red Dwarf at the end of Demons and Angels because there was actually a shot of Starbug, sort of heading right back to and Red Dwarf is in view. So they did get Red Dwarf back at the end of Demons and Angels, but clearly something at some stage has happened, And there are so many interesting fan fictions you could write linking back to reality to how they end. I mean, obviously when I get to series 7, I mean, I think there might be some kind of vague connection, between them losing Red Dwarf and this episode, but I can't remember the exact details at the moment.
Good point. Because I've always taken it for granted before. I never thought about that we don't get Red Dwarf in this episode. I always thought of, Series 6, when it opens, they've lost Red Dwarf, and I always think, okay, there's a clear delineation. They had it at the end of 5, and they don't have it at the beginning of 6, but that's true. You don't see it in this episode, so maybe they've lost it before now, and it's just not addressed. You almost wonder if they did get back on board at the end of Demons and Angels. You don't see them get back. They ended on Starbug. You don't see them get back on. I wonder if these two red dwarfs, you kind of have to wonder if these two red dwarfs that were made to last an hour and put back together, if that ship lasted.
Oh yeah, now you mention it. Yeah, I mean there is actually. I did watch carefully at the very end of Demons and Angels. I think there was a shot of Starbug sort of silhouetted it against the restored Red Dwarf.
Right.
We don't actually see them go into it, but the implication is okay. It's okay. But you're right. Maybe something went. I mean, that might have something to do. I mean, I know we're supposed to think that the reason everything went wrong is because Crichton's nanobots basically stole Red Dwarf. But honestly, it would have made far more sense to say that something went wrong at the end of Demons and Angels, to be honest, wouldn't it?
Of course, then you have to wonder, okay, where did they get Red Dwarf in season 8? Is that one that crossed from another dimension? Did they really just lose it and it came back? I mean, it doesn't work with season 8 if you put it that way, but I don't know.
Yeah. Of course, yeah. I mean, of course, there's so much that doesn't work in regard to Series 8, but no.
I was going to say, when has this show ever
Sorry, I could not resist saying that.
Anyway.
Let's not get on to Series 8 right now. Let's talk about an episode I like. Yeah, okay, yeah, so, yeah. I mean, obviously, it is interesting, the lack of Red Dwarf in this episode. It's very clearly foreshadowing the next two series, and the way Rob and Doug decided to make the series more of a survival challenge for the crew, because they felt that they were too cozy on Red Dwarf, and they may have had a point there, so, I mean, yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's true. So, and then they go and crash, they're stuck on Starbug, and then they go and crash it, and what a way to start an episode, because it's only been on for it's only been on for like 4 or 5 minutes at this point, and you think, are they dead? What happened?
Yeah, and then of course it melts into that game over thing, and it's frankly amazing scene, where we're told, you have been in hallucination for 4 years, and it's just so well done. It just works so well.
Yeah, it does. Although I have to wonder, you presumably this and the things that, like the way they talk and the way references are made, this would not be a cheap thing to do. I mean, you'd have to pay for caretakers to come in and take care of you. You have to pay for access to the technology to be immersed in this. So my question is, why is the interior of this game room so scummy looking?
I suppose the idea is, that I don't know, because I mean, the idea is it doesn't need to look nice, because obviously it's literally just for people to go in and plug themselves into a game. I mean, I suppose the recuperation lounge later on does look a bit nicer and cozy and stuff, Yeah, I don't know. Maybe all the budget went into the game, and they thought, well, it doesn't matter about the room, they actually play the game.
I was going to say, typical of high capitalism. If we don't have to put money into it, let's not. So
exactly, yeah.
And remember, gets to touch. Like, this is only the second episode, I guess, since the series started, if you don't count the pilot. So I guess it's maybe only the third episode in 5 seasons where Chris has gotten to actually act like he can touch other people and things.
Well, of course, I mean, having just watched Series 5, I mean, in almost every episode, they find a way to get around that. I mean, in Hollow's ship, obviously, he can touch...
Right, I forgot about Hollow's ship.
And then in Terraform, they briefly give him...
That's the one I was thinking of, yeah. The second one.
Yeah. I suppose you could kind of count No River, because he is able to communicate via the Hollow Whip, even so, they were finding ways to get around it, sneaking.
Yeah. So
I do want to say, it's amazing how, even when various things happen, which obviously are going to induce despair in the crew, and yet somehow it is not obvious. It's not immediately obvious that it's a hallucination. It just isn't,
Yeah, I think the star of the scene where they all wake up has to be Timothy Spall. Him
Oh
coming
yeah,
in and giving that
yeah.
whole giant exposition about the cave.
Oh yeah, it's a funny, amusing story about that because they say in the documentary, that he on his first take he completely sort of froze because he'd never been before a live audience before, and sort of started babbling, and doing it badly, but they refilmed it and he, pulled it out of the bag. So yeah.
Right.
Also, it's a good thing. Another reason they refilmed it was because the first time the studio audience were in such utter shock and despair themselves, they didn't laugh much.
But
they
all
thought
of their
they thought it was
all their
actually real,
interactions.
thought they were actually going to completely change the entire premise of the show. It must have been an amazing episode to watch as a studio audience.
Oh yeah, I'm really envious of whoever got to actually like go and watch this live and get all the
Yeah,
surprises firsthand and everything. It's a
yeah.
good thing the internet wasn't around then because I don't know if they could have kept it under wraps.
Exactly, yeah. Although a really bizarre thing is, apparently originally the intention was to, but because they didn't Rob and Doug originally didn't have that much confidence in it because they didn't get an audience reaction, and they were originally planning to put it out first, and it would it works so much better as a series finale, obviously,
Oh yeah. I did. Did you say that, or someone said that this was supposed to air at the beginning of Series 5 or somewhere else in
No,
Series 5?
apparently that was originally the intention before people started behind the scenes people started saying, look, I think this Back to Reality is really good and would work better as a finale, so I mean, yeah.
It's true. I mean, it seems like it always belonged in this spot. It doesn't seem like it would work anywhere else in the series.
I mean, it's such a prestigiously popular episode. It just works so brilliantly as a series finale. It's just weird that but the thing is, like I said, they originally, because the audience were in shock, they didn't get as good a response as they'd had on other episodes, and also they had to do a lot of editing apparently, for various reasons. So
Right.
it wasn't immediately obvious that it was going to turn out to be such a good, wonderful episode, to
Right.
Rob and Doug at the time.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting to hear the tech here, describe how the game is supposed to go compared to how their life actually has gone so far. And I love that. Oh, you played the Pratt version of Rimmer for 4 years,
Yeah,
and
it's really good the way he, sort of brutally rubs into all of them, how utterly, completely they failed,
I know, you missed all these, the Planet of the Nymphomaniacs, all the stuff you missed out on.
You missed the Planet of the Nymphomaniacs, yeah. Somebody pointed out actually once, that given that we later see Lister looking on the new crew playing the game, it's kind of odd, that anyone could just look in and watch people playing things. I mean, do they make people put coins in, on the Planet of the Nymphomaniacs or something?
But I think it's also playing with the minds of the audience because it's called, oh, well, you've been watching this TV show for 5 years. Maybe you're just looking through the view screen at people playing a game. Yeah, that's all
Yeah.
you're really doing.
Yeah, it's a great sort of
It's a nice little nudge, fourth wall nudge. I think it kind of reminds me of. I don't know if you're a Star Trek fan, but it kind of reminds me of the Next Gen episode of Star Trek where they have Moriarty on the holodeck and they have to trap him and make him think he's gotten out in the real world, and he ends up in a little storage cube so he can run out the rest of his days thinking he's in the real world. And Card makes some comment about who's to say we're not in a little box on somebody's shelf.
yeah, I mean, it's true. TV shows really enjoy doing that. I mean, there's an episode of Buffy where they, sort of play with the idea, that she's actually insane in a mental asylum and has dreamed the entire show.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, yeah.
It's always fun when you can get to a fourth wall part and do that. But I like how the tech too describes. He's basically describing Ace in a way when he talks about Rimmer. Basically, that oh, well, you're a special trained, Rimmer's actually a specially trained Space Corps operative whose
Yeah.
memories have been erased so that he can destroy Red Dwarf and guide Lister toward his ultimate. And I'm thinking, well, that's basically Ace in a way.
Was the sort of implication supposed to be there that whoever played Rimmer was supposed to eventually become Ace? I mean, because obviously that ended up happening in the show as well. But was the implication inside the hallucination that you start out as Rimmer and then you turn to Ace, or maybe?
Yeah, maybe that could be it.
I thought it in that light, but it could be. Yeah.
I mean, it really is such a game thing to happen. Think about it. If you're playing a game and you had a character that did that, you wouldn't bat an eye.
Yeah, exactly. It really is a very kind of game thing to do. Yeah,
it's sort of a commentary on the show too, because the plots in this show are so ridiculous that I think that's why this episode probably landed so well to anyone when it aired or when anyone's watching it for the first time in the run of the series. They're like, well, it does kind of make sense.
I mean, obviously, the more outlandish the plot to a particular show is, the easier it is to believe that maybe it's all someone's fantasy or hallucination or dream. Yeah, that does make sense. Yeah. Oh, I do want to talk about the way Andy asked Lister. So, did you get Kochansky? And I'm like, I was kind of, how do I put this? You get Kochansky. I really don't like the way he puts that.
Yes. Well, I'll be real, this is how Rob and Doug have treated her. I mean, they've treated her as, the totem and the abbot, the thing that, he's reached for years. I mean, I'd like to say they didn't, but they have. And this is very emblematic, especially early entertainment, where women were seen as, oh, well, they're, prizes for straight men. I mean, it hasn't improved a whole lot. It has a little bit in 30 years, but I see what you mean.
Yeah, and then of course, when we get Lister, looking into and seeing the new crew. I mean, and we see a completely different version of Kochansky. It's clearly sort of non-player character who's just put in there to be a blonde bimbo kind of prize for Lister.
Right.
It's I haven't.
It's a very different version of Lister too, and I don't like it. I mean, you're not supposed to, but I really don't like it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I get that the idea is to have someone as dramatically different from regular Lister as possible, And to be fair, I don't think Lister is devastated because he wanted that version of it. It's more
right.
What the hell is going on here? I mean, how could it be this different from the way I experienced it? Kind of.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. He looks through it and he pulls away, and he looks perplexed more than anything. He doesn't look sad. He doesn't look mad. He doesn't look yearning. He just looks, what WTF?
Exactly.
That slightly amused. He looks a little amused because he's like, oh, okay, yeah, that would happen.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I guess you could argue in universe that Kochansky looks like whatever the player who's playing Lister desires. And it just so happened that particular Lister wanted a blonde bimbo, But even so, yeah. Mm-hmm. By the way, I read a comment someone mentioning, could you sort of headcanon, that there is a version of this game, that women can play, and it's basically the parallel universe version.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, that's kind of nifty.
I
never thought of that.
It makes it less male, basically.
Yeah, I suppose that makes sense. That they would have separate gaming for women for this. I like the idea.
That women wouldn't want to play male characters. It's just, I kind of find it hard to imagine, a group of 4 women deciding to go in and play a group of 4 characters, for male characters. If there was the option to go and play for female characters instead.
Or I have a hard time imagining all four of them would want to play male characters. One or two of them might.
Exactly, basically, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
all of them wanted to play male characters, as opposed to maybe
exactly.
one or two films. But yeah, I mean, I know we're getting into sort of headcanon territory here that Robin Dub didn't think about. But I mean, it is a very interesting episode. It throws up so many interesting questions. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they. I was just going to say, so they get up and they leave, and the new crew comes in, and I have to say, the guy playing Crichton looks like he should have been playing Rimmer instead, because he kind of looks like Hayes. Not as good,
Yeah,
but he kind of looks like him.
I think the cast on the audio commentary say, "Hey, hold on, that guy looks a bit like Ace."
Yeah, he kind of does. He's got the nose and everything. So
Yeah, it's okay, kind of odd that they decided to have him play Crichton instead.
but I,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
but I love them. They're all sitting around in the lounge room afterwards. Their conversation. I'm not Rimmer.
Yeah, it's great. Oh yeah, I did want to say one more thing about the fact that they scored 4%. I have to wonder though, if they were really that bad, how did they last for 4 years?
Money talks.
Suppose, yeah.
Presumably, they paid well to be left in there.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's a set amount of time, and they bought 4 years because they wanted 4 years. I mean, you could argue that way, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, you mean in game. Well, I mean, I guess if the game
yeah.
is programmed to just seamlessly, like there are plenty of times in the episodes there are plenty of opportunities for them all to have died or whatever and reboot. Like when you look at White Hole, that's definitely an episode that you can look at and go, yeah, I could see that taking place in a game because they
Mm.
disappear and then they just come back into new, regenerate into new lives or whatever, like a gaming character would.
Yes. I mean, obviously, Red Dwarf absolutely does make sense. If you think of it as a computer game, I mean, that's probably one of the reasons why this episode works so well, because you can absolutely make an argument, that every episode of this show is people playing a computer game. I mean, it actually makes a hell of a lot of sense.
True.
But yeah, anyway, as you were saying, the recuperation lounge scene is another wonderful scene. I love the way the sort of gradual revelation of their, in inverted commas, real identities, and of course, Dibley.
Dibley, God. Yeah, Danny has a good time with that. I think the two who have the most fun in this scene are probably Bobby and Danny, because Bobby gets to play this hard ass, no longer has to, take orders or act like an android or whatever, the whole Jake Bullet thing.
Hmm.
And then Danny, gets to play a dork.
Yeah,
They're both so far away from their characters.
Yeah. It's great, really. I mean, I love the way he just he just sort of keeps repeating Dwayne Dibley and gets a laugh every time because it's just so funny. Yeah, it is interesting though, because I mean, obviously the Promised Land kind of put all of this in a different context. I guess obviously when this episode was filmed, they weren't thinking of that at all. But I mean, Doug quite obviously, deliberately in the Promised Land, made it more obvious. How can I put this? That in his young youth, teenagehood, whatever, adolescence probably, Cat was a lot more like Dwayne Dibley than we would have expected.
Well, and they kind of set it up from the beginning too, because in Waiting for God, Indoor, the first novel, which is back before all this, it's mentioned that when the cat people all left, they left behind the lame and the uncool.
Mm.
And of course, at that time, you could argue that maybe Cat hadn't been born yet. I don't know. But yeah, mixing everything together, you see it's clear that he was around and he was left behind. And so it must be because he was uncool.
basically TPL retcon that. I mean, Rodon straight up says, we left him behind because he was uncool geek, But I mean, that is a retcon. I mean, in the original novel, it's sort of implied that he hadn't been born. His parents, sort of got together after most of the cats had left. But I mean,
right.
it's I like the retcon in some ways because I mean I did notice in TPL. A cat is sort of dressed like a cool version of Dwayne, kind of. I mean, if that's not a contradiction in terms, but I mean, it's very interesting the way Howard chose to costume is as kind of a glossy, glammed up version of Dwayne Dibley.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. I was thinking in this scene too, it's very notable that Rimmer has a hell of an imagination when he puts his mind to it. Like, he could be a writer. Like, he's the one coming up with the backstory for all of them, just based on these little clues. And clearly having fun with it.
I mean, the utter glee takes Robbie into Dwayne. Although it's interesting, he does, he says, imagine, a guy with no cool, etc. Doesn't it make sense that this hapless creature will give his buck teeth to play someone like a cat in a computer game? Which is one of the few times that actually sort of compliments cats, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. As I pointed out in Demons and Angels, when he seems to care if he's going to be strangled by Lister at the end, that is another good example of.
There are moments here and there, I mean, they even share a moment at the very end of Demons and Angels, when they're sort of taking pleasure in remote controlling poor Lister, so that they do have their moments.
It is. It's a nice little. It's a nice little bonding moment for them. And normally, you might look at it and go, why is Cat being so mean to Lister? And it's like, well, because, he kept trying to choke him throughout half the episode. So.
Yeah, I mean, it is mean for Cat towards Lister, but, he has just been nearly strangled by him. And even worse in Cat's opinion, he's ruined his hemline.
But he's a cat, and cats like toys. So. If he could have a toy, he can run around. It's like a remote control mouse. I mean, if he could chase it for a while.
Yeah. But yeah. It did occur to me there's kind of awkward question, which you could whether you could argue how much the hallucination just kind of exaggerates their existing insecurities. I mean, this works with Cat, given what we learn about him in the Promised Land, and you could say.
Right.
You could say it works with Rimmer to some extent, given his terminally low self-esteem. But surely Lister doesn't secretly think, that he's in danger of becoming a mass-murdering fascist.
Well, it is. I guess you're supposed to look at it as it's despair. It's not. I don't know. It's hard to describe. These are the things, presumably. Even they even stated at the end of the episode, these are presumably the things that would make them. Despair, would make them very unhappy, almost suicidal, is if they each, had to face these things about themselves, which is interesting because, as Crichton's, lining it up at the end, it all makes sense except for Rimmer. And I was realizing this as he said it, because he's talking about Rimmer, and it plays on your insecurities, sir, because, being the brother of, having a famous, successful brother, would, negate that your upbringing is what led to your thing. And I'm thinking, but this is Rimmer's real brothers too. It's the exact same situation.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to approach that later, but I mean, actually, it works. I mean, basically, I mean, if you ship them, it works far, far better to assume that what is actually driving Rimmer to despair, and possibly also Lister is like, my God, I'm attracted to my brother. What kind of a pervert am I?
Right. Which obviously Crichton would not pick up on that part of it. So
yeah. I think it works much better to think that Rimmer is secretly thinking that, and also possibly Lister is secretly thinking that too.
Yeah. I mean, yeah,
obviously, being Sebastian would be enough to drive him to despair anyway. But I mean, it'd be nice to think, that he also reciprocates the feelings.
Oh yeah, incest would make anybody.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that would be terrible. But yeah, if you're just taking it on the surface, it wouldn't make sense for that to be Rimmer's driving thing, because it's like, but he has 3 brothers in his, quote, other life that turned out successful and raised in the same household. So how is this different? I mean, on the surface, it's pretty much exactly the same. So anyway.
I would have to keep arguing, the thing that's different. It's that it's Mr. Who's more successful than him. The one person who's managed to look down on himself for his better than, because he ran.
That's true.
Above him. I mean, I suppose you could make an argument if you wanted to.
Yeah, that makes sense. You got a good point.
It's not my preferred interpretation, obviously. But I mean, you could.
Well, no.
But you could interpret it like that.
Right. No, I know how I interpret it.
I know how I interpret it. Yes, I mean,
it's pretty much the same.
Yes, this is a very disturbing episode in some ways. But I mean, you go with a disturbing interpretation, it just kind of makes more sense character-wise, in my opinion.
I can imagine the revelation that they're half brothers in the live taping. That would have been hilarious.
Would have been, yeah. I mean, the audience do go, oh my God, really? What? They do find that very funny.
Yep.
Wait, it's interesting the way it's directed, the way they just sort of stare at each other, utterly stunned,
Right, like the whole lean in and stare. Like, I got to tell you, I don't think I have ever stood that close to my sister and stared into her face like that. Saying.
It really does not come across as a familial kind of stare, does it?
No, it does not. And people say, oh, you're reading too much into it. Again, I'm just going by my own, I've had a sister almost 40 years. I have never done that with her for any reason.
Exactly. Yes, precisely. Yes. Yeah. So, I do also like Jake Bullitt. It's amusingly touching how Crichton is initially delighted, in having, he thinks, a position of authority, and he's really relishing the thought of being a maverick detective.
Well, it's nice how he was able to take his frustration of years. Finally, he was able to take it out on Rimmer, so to speak. Hey, don't order me around. Don't assume that I'm the kind of guy who would take orders from the kind of guy you are.
Exactly, yeah. It is slightly odd, though, that he seems less bothered than you'd expect about being half human. It's all about being a detective.
Well, he has an organic brain. The real Crichton does. I think they explain in the backstory in the novel and all that he has an organic brain. So he's not thought of himself as human, but it's not too far of a stretch, I guess, to think that. Plus, you have that episode DNA where he was briefly human. So.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean maybe he's kind of moved on from the idea of I have to be human, to be worth anything, and is more about being a detective. I mean that would make sense.
Right, and Lister treats him as human. Lister always has treated him as human, so. He doesn't.
Yeah. By the way, I mean briefly, the Smegazine writers really liked this episode and based a lot of comic strips on it, but amusingly, well, much amusingly as I guess understandably, they were all based around either Jake Bullitt or Dwayne Dibley. I mean, I can guess, given the kind of audience it was aimed at, Billy and Sebastian, I mean, even going with a purely sort of surface what we learn about them in the episode, they wouldn't exactly be
right.
The ideal kind of material for a comic strips in a magazine that was aimed at, well, kids basically, I suppose.
Right, they're exaggerated. That makes sense. So
yeah,
you can visually kind of work with both of them.
Yeah, whereas obviously, it's not what you would call funny, following the adventures of the voter colonel and Billy
and his half brother Bill.
Yeah, it's funny. Did you notice the way Rimmer goes Dwayne with relish in Cat's face, and then Lister goes Bill with relish in Rimmer's face.
No, that was funny. That was good. Billy Granny Killer Doyle.
Oh, it's a ballad of Billy Granny Killer Doyle.
And then they leave and they go out to the garage and they meet your favorite character.
Oh
in
yes.
DC.
Before we get to that, I did want to briefly say it's interesting the name they choose for Rimmer, Billy Doyle, because that is a very Irish name, and I have an Irish father, and unfortunately, one of the stereotypes about Irish people is that they're drunks, So it's
Right.
interesting that they chose to give him that particular name. Talking of names. They chose Lister's new name so wonderfully. I mean, Sebastian. I mean, sorry if anybody listening is called Sebastian, but it absolutely screams kind of posh rich git.
It kind of does.
Sorry, anyone listening who's called Sebastian. I'm sure you're a lovely person.
Well, it's not a real common name. I mean, you can't think of too many people. I mean, if I had to name one under pain of death, the only one person I can think of is the actor Sebastian Stan. So
was, of course,
he seems like a really nice person, but still.
There was, of course, the former editor of the official site, the sadly late Sebastian Packard.
Oh, Seb, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I never think about Seb being the same as, yeah.
I think he went by Seb precisely because of the associations that Sebastian had, to be honest.
I would not blame him.
Yeah, I don't mean Sebastian Dorr specifically. I mean just the name in general. Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, condolences to anyone who might be listening to this who knew him personally. I mean, by all accounts, he was a very nice person. Anyway. Moving on. It's lovely. It's also lovely the way Rimmer's immediate. Are you absolutely sure this isn't my box? When it turns out that Liz is rich.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because I mean, he thinks he's still in that mindset of, wait a minute, how is he doing better than me? If all things were being fair, if that was just a game, then I should be the one who, has the clout and the status and the money.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Oh, I did want to mention there's an interesting echo. I mean, at the very start of the hallucination, when Rimmer gets up and sort of stumbles, and Lister sort of instinctively grabs his arm. I mean, obviously, it's if someone is sort of stumbling, it's kind of instinctive to grab their arm and steady them. I get that, but kind of hold it a bit longer than you would expect, really. They kind of linger on it. And later in the episode, when they're running from the fascist police, Lister, who by now thinks he is Sebastian, grabs Billy's arm, sort of protectively, and takes him to a hiding place. It's interesting the way they have that sort of echoing. I mean, I suppose you can argue in the later example, by then Lister thinks he's Sebastian, is sort of instinctively protective towards his brother, maybe. I mean, or you could read it.
Mm-hmm.
You could read it in a slashy way. I mean, you could read it either way, really, I suppose.
You can read it either way. The first one, I think, it's not just that, but it's also the way they both look down at Rimmer's arm. Clearly, I think it's meant to convey on the surface of, hey, I have a body.
Oh, yeah, I mean, obviously, it's meant to also.
I haven't had a body for years.
Also meant to establish, that he's human and he can touch. I mean, I get that. It's just, yes, the way the instances are filmed and the way the actors play it, you can read other things into it.
Right. Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. Well, that's the whole basis for fan fiction. I mean, come on.
Exactly.
I've done that.
Precisely. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Sebastian Doyle. I mean, before you know what his job is, the viewer might think, he's actually traded up here. He's rich, he's suave, he looks good, looks good in a suit, But then obviously they come out of the recuperation lounge, and they see the fascist government posters, and it's the first indication, that something very, very wrong here, and it's interesting how perfectly it works. I mean, despite the fact that we met Andy, who really couldn't be the more normal, down to earth kind of person, somehow it's still the shift in tone. It works. It works perfectly anyway.
Well, I mean, there's a reason, and I won't get up on my soapbox too long, but there's a reason we've reached a point now. Now, I can only talk in my country. I know that, in the UK, you're all having some similar, really around the world. There's kind of growing autocracy and fascist leanings in a lot of places, I think, that there wasn't 30 years ago, definitely wasn't 80 years ago. And, we're definitely seeing it here in the US. So we've gotten to a point, this sort of thing takes time to foment. So I kind of wonder, looking at that, this was 30 years ago. This, Rob and Doug are really, they've proven that they're really good
foreseeing the future in some
of
way,
human behavior, of history, of trends, things like this. And you kind of have to be to write good science fiction. You have to be able to look in the future. And so them, the whole fascist themes, the whole voter kernel, how they focus on him being a voter kernel. They focus on the ballot box. They focus on the voting part of it. And then you look at what's going on in my country, at least, where there's so much effort to quash and make voting difficult for certain people and certain groups of people that it's really, really prescient.
Yeah, I mean, it's happening over here to some extent as well, I'm afraid. I mean, I don't want to get too sidetracked.
Right. But I mean, there had to be glimmers of it. Yeah, 30 years ago, they had to be able to kind of see that.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you could say it's kind of realistic, given what currently living through, that, somebody like Andy would carry on being his kind of normal kind of self,
We're all just living our lives, yeah.
Exactly, yes. And then, of course, as you did mention earlier, we encounter a very, very memorable one-off scene character. I mean, I cannot praise the performance of Lenny Von Dolan here enough. I mean, it's just so memorable. I mean, the way he absolutely instantly, sells this fascist world. I mean, you see him and you immediately believe that they are in a fascist world.
Yeah, I mean, he's just one of a parade of one-off characters in the entire series of Red Dwarfs that are just really high quality. Just really, okay, I may only have this role for 3 minutes, but I am good at what I do and I'm going to act the hell out of it.
And he does that. I mean, it kind of seems unfair, they just credit him as cop, I mean, it feels as though he should have a longer credit than that, it just seems so, cop, I mean, as though he just appeared, and booked someone for speeding or something.
Right.
Credit him as fastest cop or something. I don't know. Anyway, yeah.
He definitely puts across. He definitely, like, even if you didn't see the fascist posters, I think you would get a sense of the world from watching how he, his lines and how he acts, and then how he defers to Lister. I think you wouldn't get as clear a sense of it, but you would know something was wrong.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Now you mention it, I mean, I wouldn't, lose the posters because they do add to the atmosphere of voting. But yeah, you actually don't need them. All you need really is Lenny Von Dolan's performance, because he sells it so absolutely perfectly. And obviously, the scariest thing is, here is this very, very scary character, and then he sees Lister and he's petrified.
Yes, that's it. That's exactly what I mean. And then he starts talking about, you change people, you alter people, you alter them from being alive to being dead.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like, that's pretty chilling.
I mean, as a cast on the commentary, that's a nice way of putting it, isn't it? Yeah, yeah, and
he just underplays it so well.
Yeah, I mean, it's just everything, I mean, the way the sort of nuances, the sort of expressions, the way he's sort of looking carefully around himself, clearly with half an eye on, am I about to be ambushed? Is someone spying on us? That kind of thing. All those little nuances really sort of add to the effectiveness of the scene.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I did want to mention I watched this episode a heck of a lot because I love it so much, and I didn't see it at first, but I mean, more recently I did. I mean, how do I put this? You can definitely read Lady Von Dolan's performance as very sort of subtly hinting as having a kind of homoerotic fascination with the voter colonel.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you have to read it that way, but you can read it that way.
Right. No, you could, and there's a definite vibe that you get off of him.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something about the way he sort of closes his eyes and sort of something about the intensity of the performance, and plus obviously
right,
and plus obviously, I mean, it's basically canon in the performance that he would literally do anything for the voter colonel, and yes, you can argue that's because he's terrified of him, but I mean, there could be more to it than that.
Yeah, I think the word that is used in these instances is he's coded a certain way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You can't say, you can't come out, openly and say, well, he did this and this and that makes it, but you can definitely point to like little clues and hints and, performances. Now, I believe the actor who played him, I believe he was gay.
Yeah,
but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. It just means you look back on that and you think the actor would definitely, as a person, have been aware, not only as an actor, but as a gay man, what little clues and hints would have, been aware of this as he was performing and chose to make certain decisions or not.
I mean, when I found out about him when he very sadly died recently, because I hadn't actually known before that he was LGBT club.
Right.
But when I found out, I thought, yeah, that makes it more likely that he deliberately put in that sort of very subtle undercurrent. I mean,
right.
I think, how do I put this? When you've got a character who hasn't been given any canon orientation, and you yourself are an LGBT plus actor, I think you're more likely to decide that with this character there's a complete blank slate. Okay, I think I'm going to play this character as gay, because
there's no reason not to. I mean,
exactly.
Like I say, just not focus on that. Just be okay. This person is this way, and oh yeah, just one aspect of him. He happens to be a gay man.
Mm.
I mean, and you can't say, oh well, it's because the actor was. Well, that's not true. I mean, look at How I Met Your Mother. Neil Patrick Harris played a straight man on that very convincingly for 7 years. So
yeah, I have actually.
I mean, it's all in choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have actually seen Lenny Von Dolan in a role when he was very, very young in the Electric Dreams film, and he plays a straight man in that, and he was fine, I mean, I mean, actors, it's their job to act. They can pull off playing sexualities that are not their own. It's part of acting.
Exactly. So anyway, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Obviously, I mean, it's the way that this scene is so good because I mean, establish, that this cop, is so dedicated, to being a cop that he's literally prepared to shoot this little girl because she's stolen an apple, and I mean that is how dedicated he is to his fascism. I mean, which is obviously terrifying as it is. And then we establish, that Lister is apparently worse than that.
Well, and I think it's the fact that he has not just the coding or whatever, but he has such a strong reaction to Lister, and it's not just how he reacts. It's that if you keep in mind that Lister hasn't, well, I keep calling him Lister Doyle, he hasn't been around for 4 years. So what feeling for or what effect must he have on this guy to have not seen him for 4 years and still have this strong a reaction?
I mean, I think obviously the idea was, to imply, that Sebastian is just that scary,
terrifying.
Yeah. But I mean, you can read more into it, and honestly, frankly, I think it makes this seem more interesting and the character of the cop more interesting if you assume that he also had some kind of power crush, it was infatuated with Sebastian's power, I mean, because that makes that's complete sense for this character, he's clearly all about exerting power and authority.
Right. And I will say it's very interesting as you're watching this. Craig never acts like Sebastian. He always he plays the whole thing as, I'm Lister and I'm confused as to why I'm here. But there's a moment where, one of the others questions the blue-eyed cop and he snaps back at him and Sebastian says, answer him. And it's just the way he says it that it's like, okay, I could see this.
Exactly, yeah.
I could see him as Sebastian.
Yeah, I mean, that is. I mean, to be honest with you, that is why I've written so much about this episode, because I'm so frustrated that we never actually got to see Craig play actual Sebastian, as opposed to Lister thinking he might be Sebastian.
Right.
We do get kind of a hint of it in the Inquisitor, when he's dangling the Inquisitor over the chasm. I mean, and that is another thing where you think, Craig could absolutely pull off playing a villain, if they'd given him the opportunity.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I didn't want to get to the end before pointing out the car chase scene. Just the absolute brilliance of shooting it the way they did, where they got to save money and also for maximum comedic value. Because you really need some comedy in this episode. It was starting to veer.
Obviously, it's such a relief to the audience, and the viewers, as he goes, oh my God, it's all right. It was just a hallucination, So obviously, thank God, and then you get this funny budget car chase, which is a wonderful way, obviously, of filming a car chase without actually filming a car chase.
Exactly. Which the best part of that scene is the part you don't see in the Smeg ups where Chris falls off his box.
Yeah, I always laugh. I always laugh at that. It's so important. Every time I watch the episode, I half expect him to fall over. I mean, you could kind of see he's doing it very carefully. I don't want to fall over again.
Yeah, exactly. And then when they all put their heads together, I gotta say, I understand, like, in quote reality, I understand Billy Doyle sticking his head in between these other two so they can all share the bullet. But what the hell is it going to do to Rimmer? First of all, what's it going to do to him? His head is air. And second of all, how is he wedged between? I always thought that should have been filmed differently. He should have been on an end because he's there in between Lister and Cat. How do you explain that in universe? He doesn't have any solidity.
Well, I suppose in the hallucination, he thinks he's Billy. He thinks he's human. A bullet would actually kill him. I
know. I mean, I know why the characters do it. It just seems like if you're the director, it would be one of those little, inconsistencies. Someone might go, "Wait a minute."
Yeah, well, no, I mean, I get what you mean. It's kind of a weird way to position them. But I mean, well, I guess that is the way that they picked for some reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess, and it adds to the comedy value. So yeah, and nothing happens anyway. So
talking of the comedy value, you did mention, and now every time I watch that scene, I think of it when Jake says, "But there's only one bullet left," and then and now I always think of that cartoon with Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck. Hey, laughing boy, there was only one bullet left.
One bullet left. Hey, laughing boy, there's one bullet left. Yep. Oh, Bugs Bunny.
Unintentionally, I can't think so because obviously it's supposed to be a very serious scene. But maybe they've been watching Bugs Bunny when they wrote that.
Maybe. You could write a whole treatise on how Bugs Bunny is Lister and Daffy Duck is Rimmer, but we won't get into that now because there's no time.
Exactly. Yes. We have just hit the 1 hour mark, and I mean we have not quite finished yet, and I want to do this episode justice. It deserves it. Oh yeah. I mean we cut back to the hallucination after the relief of the car chase, and then we realised actually the danger is still very real. They could still actually die. So
right.
And obviously, I mean, it makes sense that they're all suicidal at this particular moment. Well, it doesn't make as much sense for Rimmer, but we've covered that. But I do wonder, Sorry, I did want to praise Hattie here for the wonderful swan song she has in this episode, because she is the one that literally saves their lives in her last episode, and
Yes.
yeah, honestly, kudos to her acting here, because she shows genuine, believable concern, for them.
Right. As much as you can for being, stuck on another part of the set behind a camera and only being able to go through your voice and your face.
I've tried to imagine this scene with Norman's Holly, and obviously he would have tried to save him too, but I think it would have had quite the same impact, because obviously the way he played the part was different, and he didn't really go for the sort of dramatic kind of vibe, I mean, I don't know, maybe if he'd still been around, they would have staged it a bit differently or something, but
Norman is very dry, whereas Hattie shows more, I don't want to say strident emotion, maybe just more immediate emotion. She can get away with, being more concerned, or she does get away with being more concerned, whereas Norman always played it as very dry and comedic.
Yeah, I mean, I think it might just be the difference between, I don't want to say the actors' personalities, but it might be the difference in actors' personalities. I mean, or it might just be that they chose to play it in different ways. You can put it either, you believe it either way.
Right.
Yeah, but anyway, like I said, basically, I mean, you will hear when the White Hole podcast comes out, me sort of fangirling more about Hattie's performance. But at least if she never comes back, at least she went out on a high, I suppose.
Yeah.
If you have to go out, this is the episode to go out on. Mm-hmm. But sorry, when I was saying about Rimmer having a does Rimmer actually have a reason to kill himself in the hallucination? Did you have more to say about that, or did I felt like I interrupted you there, or have we already covered that? I mean, he does not have such strong reasons to kill himself as the others do, given the similarity to his real life family.
No, I think I covered it. I think I covered pretty much all I wanted to say about it. I just wanted to point that out earlier. So, and that's really all I had written down.
I just wanted to make sure that I hadn't cut you off before we had a point that you had to make. Right. Okay. I'm just trying to think what I just want to make sure that I have covered everything about this wonderful episode, because I really do enjoy it so much. Right. Okay. So yeah. So of course, the scene where they, Hattie manages to get Holly manages to get through to them, and they realise that it was a hallucination, and they quite immediately leaps in to explain everyone's motivations. It's just too pat, for me anyway.
Yeah, it is. I think that's sort of a danger of it being a 30-minute show, and this episode really feels, I mean, it's really packed. I mean, they could have turned this into an hour special.
It's a real shame it wasn't a two-parter, because they could have made so much more out of it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and the way Lister and Mirror sort of look at each other, I mean, I kind of feel, like they're both thinking to themselves, I'm not sure I entirely believe this, but I'm going to go along with it.
Yeah. So, it feels like one of those, I don't want to say it's tacked on ending, because it explains it, it's good, but it's clear that they had to wrap it up in a hurry.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, mm-hmm, yeah, and actually, as you said, I mean, you can make sense of all of it. I mean, you can obviously it makes sense to make Cat Dwayne Dibley. It makes sense to have Crichton kill a human, because obviously that would make him want to kill himself, and obviously equally having Craig Lister think he's Sebastian Doyle, that obviously that would make him want to kill himself. All that makes sense. It's really only Rimmer which doesn't entirely make sense, but oh well, we can make sense of it with our stories.
or you could Or you could just argue that Rimmer always feels a little suicidal or a little depressed because Rimmer's always just like a wreck of a person. I mean, not to make I'm not making light of anyone who's suicidal. I'm not doing that. I'm just saying Rimmer literally is just always on edge, always, assumes the worst and, thinks badly of his lot in life. So
It's true. It's interesting. I mean, because I had always thought of Rimmer as not suicidal because, as somebody pointed out, in early seasons he really fights not to be switched off, and you'd think if he was,
right.
But then, of course, we do get the Promised Land, which is the only time that the only other time that we see an actually suicidal Rimmer. But I mean, for most of the show, you don't really get the impression that he actually wants to not exist anymore. I mean, it's
Well,
yeah.
Rimmer clearly has ambition, and you can use ambition to push through a lot of things. I mean, I think there's probably a lot of real people who have, had suicidal ideations or thoughts or whatever, and they've not followed through with it for one reason or another. They don't really want to die. They really feel like, they know it's temporary, or they're really conditioned to be like, I can't be a quitter. I can't quit. And that is part of Rimmer's thing, is he's not a quitter.
I mean,
he's not very good at things, but he's not a quitter.
I mean, I guess you could say that that his constant attempts to be an officer are kind of his coping mechanism. Yeah, makes sense.
Right. And again, I don't want to make light. I don't want to say be pat, so quitter. People who that's I think I'm not saying it well, but you know what I'm saying. You know what I mean. I mean his thing is I'm going to keep pushing at this even when I don't feel well about it. Sometimes he clearly he doesn't want to go through the work to be an officer, but he keeps trying, and he wants to. He tries for things that he clearly would not be good at and would probably not be happy with because he has been conditioned. I don't quit. I don't give up. I don't, even to the point where he won't do anything pleasurable. Maybe he would be better as an artist or something, but he's not going to be do anything like that because it's not what he's supposed to do, quote unquote.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's. I mean, you'd think if he really wanted to be an officer that bad, he'd go for an easier exam, like the chef's exam, like Lister does, But
right.
No, it has to be astronavigation because that's what was hammered into him as a child, Yeah.
Exactly. So, anyway, I'm no psychologist. All I can do is what I watch. So,
yeah. Okay. So yeah. Very ending back to reality. It's very sort of quiet and subdued, and obviously you'd expect that because obviously the crew have been through a pretty traumatic experience, But it works really well. I mean, it's sort of beautifully. I really like the lighting, and it's sort of beautifully shot. And Rimmer, to me, looks the calmest there that he has for the whole of series 5.
Yep, that's true.
I personally like to think that's because he's found he's not related to Lister.
Yeah. Well, in this episode, it has literal family, and this episode really has the found family feel to it. I mean, this is one of the episodes that may be one of the reasons it's so popular too. Is it's one of the ones that has such a real, they all pull together to get something done.
Yes, very, very much so. I mean, I hadn't sort of so much thought of it in that aspect before. But you're definitely right. I mean, Back to Reality is absolutely one of the sort of episodes where they work together as a team, to figure out what's going on. I mean, and it's just nice to see.
Yeah.
Okay, so one more thing remaining, which is scores out of 10, both overall and for slashiness.
I'm going first. Well, overall, I would probably say 10 out of 10. I have to defer to the rest of the fandom. I think this is not the only 10 episode in the entire series run, but is one of, definitely.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
And for slashiness, just for, not maybe overt, but just for the sheer number of fanfics this has spawned, I'm going to give it a 10. Just because it really does drop all these little, I mean, you can really work with it a lot.
Yeah, you really can, absolutely, yeah. Okay, well, my scores, I mean, I don't think it's going to be a surprise to anyone that overall I'm definitely giving this a 10 out of 10. It's, yeah, and like you said, it's not the only episode. I mean, episodes I've given 10 out of 10 so far also include Dimension Jump and Thanks for the Memory, so I mean,
Right.
this is very, very much up there, and it is actually currently my favourite episode, so yes, it's, I mean, really, there isn't anything more to say about it without, just sort of descending into gushing as far as quality goes. It really is just such a wonderful episode. Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, but regarding the slashiness, I am also giving it 10 out of 10 on that score. I mean, not only for the sort of subplot with the Sebastian and Billy thing, but also for Lenny Von Dolen's performance as the blue-eyed cop, which which does very subtly hint, that he has sort of feelings for the voter colonel, which aren't just being terrified of him. So so given both of those, I think it definitely deserves a 10 out of 10 on that score as well. And that wraps up this episode of Smeg and the Femmes. Thank you to Holger Met for technical help, and thank you again to my guest, Veronica Rich.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. So if you'd like to give us feedback, you can do so on Tumblr or Discord on the post where I'll be linking to this episode. You can also email us at smegandthefemmes@gmail.com. And my customary announcement that if you want to find the earlier episodes, go on YouTube, search for Smeg and the Femmes, and you will find our episode archive on there. And the next episode we'll be covering is the start of a new era in the show, without Holly and without Red Dwarf the ship, and that, of course, will be Sirens. I hope you'll join us then, but for now, goodbye.